Good evening, everyone. Now, the first thing you want to know about me is that I love to hike a lot. Me and my friends go out as often as we can, which isn't a lot right now because school takes up a lot of time, but we love to hike. Over summer, we decided to go on a 50-mile hike through San Francisco, and it was a lot of fun. But the last day was the most memorable part because we stopped at a Starbucks, and we had one other woman in there with us. And one of our adults walked over to her and complained about the noise because we were being quite loud. But then she walked up and ordered her drink in sign. The woman was completely deaf, couldn't have heard a word he said to her or anything that we were saying. We were all laughing hysterically. Of course, she couldn't hear that, but it was really funny to us. The thing is, in my high school, we offer sign language, and I decided to take that course. So I walked up to that woman and I decided to talk to her. I signed with her, and everyone was so awed because I was able to have an entire conversation without moving my mouth. This is why my purpose tonight is to inform you about Big D deaf culture. Tonight I will cover the topics of cultural art, etiquette, and attire. My sources are What is Proper Attire for an Interpreter by Ashley Adams Mott, Learn Stories, Traits, Attitudes, and Other Aspects of Deaf Culture by Jamie Burke, Community and Culture, Frequently Asked Questions by the National Association of the Deaf, General Communication Etiquette with Deaf Individuals by Rosanda Linaranzi, Quick Statistics About Hearing, National Institute of Deafness and Other Communication Disorders, Resources, Orange County Deaf Equal Access Foundation, OC Deaf, by the same group, and Biography by Nancy Rourke, as well as Davia Deaf Art by Carlin Twett. Now, how could you benefit from learning about deaf culture? Well, in work settings and even in your daily life, you may encounter someone who only signs, who can't hear a word that you or anyone else says. And this happens to be a major problem for deaf people, so that can help you and them. Furthermore, 2 to 3 out of every 1,000 kids is born deaf. This is just from birth. Other people can go deaf due to disease or accidents. As I found out tonight right before coming here, one of my close friends is actually going deaf because of a disease she was just diagnosed with. So this is a very good thing to learn for her and for all of you. Now, the first thing I would like to go into is deaf cultural art. Now, you might have heard me say a term earlier, Big D deaf culture. You might be wondering what this is. Well, that refers to the first letter, the capital D. That was not because, a title. It was because this is literally what the culture is called. Little d refers to the actual disability of not being able to hear. This can relate to anyone who is just old or is actually deaf themselves and does not associate with the culture. But Big D deaf culture, you don't have to be deaf, you can be hearing, and it's those who decide to immerse themselves in the culture, such as myself. Now, one of the most amazing things about deaf culture is deaf theater. You may not know this, but there are a lot of small deaf theaters that include children and other people, adults alike, and they use ASL in their plays. It's much like watching a silent movie, but with a play. Now, even if you don't know sign language, these plays are very understandable and happen to be quite comical. But one of the most famous deaf groups is Deaf West. They're known for their performance on Broadway, known as Big River, and they combine hearing and deaf actors to create a mix that everyone can enjoy equally. Now, next is deaf art, known as Davia art. This stands for Deaf View Image Art, and it goes into the hardships of being deaf. As many of you most likely don't know, sign language is actually outlawed in the United States up until very recently, the past 4 or 5 decades. They were only allowed to vocalize, they were only allowed to speak. They had to learn how to read lips and say words without being able to hear them. And that's why Nancy Rourke is one of the most famous Davia artists. She uses primary colors and paints the hardships of deaf, not being able to sign or hear what others have to say. Now, not all artists are like this. Some just include to use a certain sign, like the sign for airplane, inside of their artwork to combine it and become a part of the Big D deaf cultural art. Next, I'd like to talk to you about deaf etiquette. While it's not super different from our own etiquette, it is kind of different because they are deaf. When trying to get their attention, you're not going to scream at them, "Hey, look over here," because what's the point? They can't hear you. So what you do is usually you'll wave at them in the face or lightly tap them on the shoulder, or in a room like this, you might be able to feel the vibrations, so that'll turn them to look, or you can flash the lights. That's a major thing. Even with phones, they'll have the light flash a certain color so they know who's calling. Now, eye contact is major. If I'm talking to you about her, she's going to find it very rude if I'm asking you questions like, what's her name? What's her favorite color? How old is she? And she doesn't answer any of the questions. That's why you look the deaf person in the eye as you're talking to them, even if they don't look at you and they're watching the interpreter. And finally, I'd like to talk to you about attire. This is very simple in the fact that you don't want to wear anything with a design. I messed up a little bit and wore something with a design, but the black is actually the correct color for me, because people with fairer skin tones will wear darker colors, blacks, grays, things like that, to better show off their hands and their skin tones, and darker people will use much lighter colors. In conclusion, tonight we talked about Big D deaf cultural art, etiquette, and attire of the underappreciated deaf culture. Tonight I'd like to leave you with a quote. Let your deafness no longer be secret, even in art. Ludwig van Beethoven.